Okay, it's 9:30. Morning, folks. Thank you for joining us. I'm Andrew Mades with ZDHC, and it's the October Forum call. Today, we're talking about wastewater guidelines and a little bit behind the scenes. First, we'll go through our calls to action. On the agenda today, we have updates and calls to action, some upcoming webinars, events. The ZDHC Community Forum has an update. Um, we'll have a bit of a panel discussion and then end with the Q&A. So for updates, first we have the MMCF Guidelines version 3.0 and the Guidelines Industry Standard Implementation Approach version 3.0. Those are all coming out this month, as well as the Wastewater and Sludge Guidelines version 2, and the ETP assessment chapter has been added to the output section. For upcoming webinars, on 6th of November, we have the MMCF Guidelines webinars in English on the 6th of November, on in Brazilian on the 27th of November, in Brazilian Portuguese, my apologies, and in Chinese on the 30th of December. For suppliers roadmap to zero for output version 2.0 will be in English on the 13th of November, and for chemicals to zero progressive it will be in English on the 4th of December, and finally the suppliers to zero version 2.0 will be in English on the 22nd of January. And you can register with the ZDH. You can register with the QR code to go to the ZDHC event tool right there, or visit events.roadmaptozero.com. On to the next slide. For calls to action, Chemicals to Zero Progressive, the signatory review, the deadline for that is it runs between 30th of October to the 14th of November. Please check your signatory environments, the VEs or the internet, depending on which stakeholder group you're part of. Now, for upcoming regional conferences, from the 11th to the 12th of November, we have the European Conference in Alicante, Spain. And at the end of the month, on the 28th of November, we have the South Asia Conference in Bengaluru, India. Again, you can reach those on events.roadmaptozero.com or use the QR code to reach the same website. Just take a second for you there. And finally, we have the ZDHC Community Forum and the forum calls. Just a reminder to try the website out, ask your questions, answer them if you know them. We want to build this up to be a community space for the ZDHC community, and we need you to make it work and to make it run. So please check it out, scan it if you can, and otherwise, you can give it a Google search. It's also on our website. Finally, for wastewater, behind the scenes, we have with us today Phil Patterson, the chair of the ZDHC Wastewater Council, and Tejas Edvinkar, the water technical manager for the competence centers. And I'm here to ask them some questions. So, welcome, guys. Oh,
Thank
fine.
you.
I'm sorry. We have one last thing. I didn't realize that. No, that's the next slide. Here we are. Let's just chat for a minute. Welcome, Phil. Welcome, Tejas.
Thanks, Andrew.
Thanks, Andrew.
So I guess my first question would be, what is the purpose of the wastewater and sludge guidelines? And that would be to Tejas.
Yeah, thanks, Andrew, for this question. The purpose of the wastewater and the sludge guidelines is to set a single and a globally unified expectations for the sampling, testing, and the reporting of the industrial wastewater and sludge, which is generated from the textile, apparel, leather industries, as well as the footwear industries, with special regards to the wet processing operations that a facility carries on. The wastewater guidelines is also a criteria for the quality that we set in the wastewater and sludge guidelines, which is expected to be monitored by the supplier so that it does not negatively impact the environment. So this is one of the main purpose and the objective of the wastewater and sludge guidelines, Andrew.
Okay. And I understand you work with the Wastewater Council to put this together, to organize that. Who
Yes.
is on the council and how are they selected?
So council is basically an independent body that comprises of individuals who are subject matter experts in the domain, and they contribute actively during the developing or updating any of our wastewater and sludge guidelines. And we have today Phil, who is the chair, and there are many individuals who are subject matter experts in their particular domain. So yeah, yeah.
Very nice. Well, Phil, to you then, how does the Wastewater Council decide what to update?
Well, it's
And
more
welcome. Sorry.
Thank you. Yeah, it's more than just an update process of the limit. So when we come round to the update, the update cycle, we have to look at the scope. So which facilities are in scope and which are not, and we have to draw some line somewhere so that we are not looking at at the moment the effluent from refineries or from the chemical industry. We have to be clear what is in scope and what isn't. And also we've got to focus on, what is most important. So we do have a volume threshold. So if you've got a tiny facility that is only um, discharging a couple of meters cubed per day, that's currently out of scope. We'd still recommend that smaller facilities meet the guidelines, but it's not something that's massively, going to have a massive impact on the bigger picture. We also look at the structure, so that effluent discharge isn't effluent discharge. We've got direct dischargers who have got a full effluent treatment facility on site. We have got some that do partial treatment and then send it to a CETP or to a municipal treatment plant. And there is some where it goes essentially directly from the machines to the CETP, Central Effluent Treatment Plant, or Municipal Effluent Treatment Plant. We also look at what I'd say is the criticality. So we decide which parameters are a situation where they would raise a flag, where there would be corrective action required. There are others that are measure and report. So typically, when we introduce a new parameter, we may well look at this as what we call a measure and report parameter. So it's mandatory that the parameter is measured. It's mandatory that it's reported, but it's not necessarily going to raise a red flag. So it's for us to get an understanding of what's happening out there. We will
Mhm.
look at any additional chemicals and parameters that we need to consider. Now, the way that we work with the wastewater guidelines is we follow the MRSL. So for version 3, any new chemicals that are on MRSL version 3 will logically fall into the wastewater guideline version 3. There may be some chemicals that they are an issue for input and they're always destroyed during the process, so they're never an issue in wastewater. And there may be some chemicals that are formed during processes that are never present in a chemical input, but largely we follow on from the MRSL.
Mhm.
And then we review all the limits, and we review all the test methods, and we make updates where there are any errors, and we're not perfect. People kindly point out errors where we may have a spelling mistake, we may have a cast number that's wrong. Um, we may have some ambiguity in wording where we try and clarify that on an ongoing basis. And then we will look at the limits. So maybe they're too lenient, maybe they're too stringent, maybe test methods have changed and the limit of quantification has changed. So we need to make those updates as well. So it's a quite a holistic way of looking at these things. It's not just a case of chemical X. Do we think the limit of 10 is okay? No, we'll move it to 20. There is an element of that, but it's a lot more wide ranging.
That's really interesting. And so as well, you're chair of the council, how does that change the way you view the work and how do you work with the how does that let's say what does what does chairing the council mean and where does that affect the decision making?
Well, I mean, the first thing to say is being chair of the Wastewater Council is it's a big honour because the wastewater guidelines and also the MRSL have become the essentially the de facto global standards. Legislation is incredibly fragmented for chemicals and for discharge, and they become the de facto global standard. So it's a very responsible role, and
Mhm.
one which I take very, very seriously. On a week-to-week basis, it means liaising with Tejas to set agendas and to make sure that we're covering off all the things I mentioned previously. But then when it comes to working with the council, it's soliciting views from the council members. It is balancing different people may have different views on something. People have got different levels of expertise in certain areas, and it's just trying to find the appropriate decision in any area. And also, it's making sure, along with Tejas, that we're not just building a piece of paper with numbers on it that gives us a warm feeling. We've always got to think about how can we police this? How can we communicate that? So there's an element of the council works to make these decisions, but additionally, I'll be having conversation with Tejas, behind the scenes to just make sure everything is pulled together and tied together. But essentially, I'm the ringmaster of a group of people who are more talented than me. That's the nature of the job.
And just to clarify, on the council, I believe none of you are actually with ZDHC. You're all from like, well, organizations that we're working with and companies, yes?
Yeah, I mean, what we've got is we look at we get people from different sectors.
Mhm.
So we get people from industry, which is really important for wastewater, from academia, from the service providers, um, from brands. So we've got a mixed bag of people in there, so that we get different viewpoints as well as the different expertise. We've got people in from NGOs. We've got people from with legal expertise from regulators. So it's really it's a great group to work with, and we just have to respect everybody's abilities and make sure that that is reflected in the decision making.
Absolutely. And I just wanted to make sure folks knew that Phil is coming in to work with ZDHC. This is not an all internal conversation with us here. Yeah.
No, and I think that
Yeah.
this is where obviously the ZDH team, so Tejas on the Wastewater Guidelines and Pushkar similarly on the MRSL Council, are vitally important in terms of managing the process. And we don't ignore their specific expertise either. There is a contribution from CDHC definitely, but we make decisions independently.
Hmm.
And if the council disagrees with a proposal that comes from Texas or from somebody else within ZDHC, well, we say that, and that's respected.
Absolutely. Now I think we should move to the next question to keep with time, but well, this one goes to Tejas. Why do we do the updates in the cadence that we do? Because we keep a regular schedule, and I think every year, every other year, you can talk more on this.
Yeah, so the backbone of the wastewater guidelines is basically the MRSL guidelines, what we have. So if there is an update in the MRSL, then that is getting reflected. So that is the reason we have this regular update cadence uh, uh, once in 2 years, and there is 1 year transition period, so that we don't publish it immediately and we start implementation from tomorrow, but we give time for industry to adopt, because there are many things which happens in the background, like approving the laboratories, approving the samplers, making the platform ready for the new guidelines. So there are many things which goes in the background. So that is the reason we have this kind of update cadence.
Hmm. Very nice. Believe, well, we talked a bit about disagreement in the group. Do you want to expand on that, Phil, or do you think you work towards consensus?
No, I think it's
Just the-
important people have transparency of how decisions are
Mhm.
made. We try and agree everything by consensus, and this is something where if you imagine we've got you know people from industry, we've got people from brands, we've got people from NGOs, from regulatory positions. There are different views and different views, particularly on stringency and um, you know, there'll be an argument. So well, we should manage things at the tightest possible limits, and others say, well, we should be looking at this from a toxicological perspective and what matters from, is it okay to have it there, but if it's not going to be any bother for anybody. Now, so we do have differences of opinion. We tend to manage it by consensus because we respect each other's views. We know each other's expertise, and we know that that nobody's going to come in here and just try and get their way. It's
Mhm.
everybody's working for what is best for the industry and what can be achieved pragmatically for the industry. And again, that's part of my role as chair, is to keep reminding people that, yeah, you would like this to be lower or you would like this to be higher, but there may be consequences. So what we sometimes do is make a decision, and then the next meeting, somebody comes along with another piece of information and says, actually, we don't have the test method, or there's a new test method, or there's some legislation somewhere, and we change it on the basis of
Mhm.
information provided by one person. So it's a dynamic situation, but if we do ever hit a situation where we've got option A or B, it goes to a vote. I don't have a vote, but I've got a casting vote. Now, it's never come to that with the Wastewater Council, but in the MRSL Council, that has happened previously when we were looking at rationalising about 30 MRSLs that had appeared out there in the industry and deciding which chemicals went on. And there's some decisions there that went to a vote, and my casting vote either put chemicals on or left them off. But that's the way it works.
By casting, you mean the tiebreaker, right?
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Nice. Yeah. I have two questions from the audience, both from Uma Shankar. First would be to Phil and the second to Tejas. So for Phil, what steps is ZDHC taking to increase awareness and participation of SMEs and tier two suppliers in wastewater reporting? And Tejas, you can also answer this. This is
I think that's probably more one for Tejas than for me, to be honest with you. Sorry,
okay.
Tejas. Throw you
No.
the hot potato.
So, see, we need to understand. So, we at ZDHC, the applicability of the wastewater guidelines is not basically on the size of a company. Okay, it is basically on the daily discharge volume. So, if you are a facility that discharges uh, an effluent or a discharge volume is equal to or greater than 15 cubic meter per day, that is where the applicability is. So it can be a small scale industry, it can be a medium scale, it can be a large scale, or it can be a conglomerate. So that is what something which we focus on. We have never segregated facilities based on the SMEs, large scale, medium scale, small scale, or anything uh, on that front. But it is more on the applicability, which is the threshold of equal to or greater than 15 cubic meter per day or less than 15 cubic meter per day. That is basically the applicability. Regarding the awareness or the scalability, whenever we have guidelines update, we do informative webinars, sessions like this forum calls, where we keep an update like what is happening, and our regional representatives are spread across the globe, who are in touch with the local brand representatives, the facilities. Then we also have the regional conferences where we provide these details, what's happening, what's new, and that is how we spread those details. And yeah, I think that's how we keep the details updated and industry updated of what's happening and what is coming next.
hmm Then a follow-up for you. Well, a second question for you, not a follow-up. What are the most common technical gaps you see during facility wastewater data review or verification?
I think one of a common trend which we have seen is there is not a proper understanding or a proper definition when it comes to the discharge types. So we have discharge types like direct discharge, indirect discharge, with sludge, without pretreatment, zero liquid discharge. So there is not a proper understanding as such. So that is one of thing that some facilities consider themselves as a zero liquid discharge, but when they impact or they recover water and utilize those process recovered water to gardening and all, that is not classified as ZLD, but that is more of a direct kind of discharge. So there is this kind of understanding gaps, which we are always there to support. Whenever we have such cases, we always get back to them with the customer support team, and we try to resolve it. But I think that is some kind of things which we encounter on day-to-day basis. But I won't say the technical gaps or any such things related to this. No.
I think I just add something in there. It's not a technical
Yeah.
element, but one of the biggest challenges we find is getting an understanding of what the report tells us. Now, in terms of the conventional parameters on the wastewater guidelines, your temperature, your COD, BOD, TSS, TDS, etc. That is essentially a conformance issue, and if people don't meet those, there is an issue that needs to be addressed. That is considered, a failure. With the MRSL chemicals, it's a detection. It shouldn't be considered a failure, and I think sometimes brands and facilities don't understand this. It's not a good situation to have a detection, but the idea there is that this highlights that you've got a problem with your chemical inputs, and it is something to be resolved. But it is a continuous improvement loop. It's an
Hmm.
indicator that there is something to be done with the inputs. So when people say you have, somebody's got a failure on their Clearstream report, if it's conventional parameters, then you're probably in danger, or quite possibly in danger, of having problems with the regulatory authorities, and you should consider it more of a failure. But with the MRSL chemicals, it's flagged, but it shouldn't be considered like being kicked out of a supply chain.
Hmm.
And sometimes I think that these detections, whilst it's important that we act on them, it shouldn't be kicking somebody out of a supply chain and sort of hanging them out to dry and to putting the supplier on the naughty step. It's we just have to be aware of that.
Hmm. Moving from one challenge to others, this is a question for both of you. What has been the biggest challenge with this update?
Um,
Yeah, yeah, please.
yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things, and we're into sort of technical nerdy detail. One is the management of cast numbers, and this is a common thread across the MRSL and the wastewater guidelines. So if you've got something like APOs or organotins, or anything where you can have isomers or salts, or variations, how many cast numbers do we put down? We need enough such that the labs can detect things. But what we don't want it to be is like a PhD thesis of this is every cast number known to man. And the labs can't even purchase reference samples. So finding that balance is always a challenge. And also, whilst I say we always follow the MRSL, if we've got issues with the MRSL on something like cast numbers, it's stupid to not try to resolve it when we come to the wastewater guidelines. So if we've got an entry on the MRSL that says multiple, that's not very helpful for the lab. So we make sure we try and tidy it up on the on the wastewater. We've got an ongoing. Um, I feel like I'm in a hamster wheel with boron, that we can't get out of. So boron salts, we've got a number of boron salts which are restricted on the MRSL, and as soon as you put them into water, they dissociate, and you get boron and the counter ion. So all you can test for is boron. So you can't say that the salt was definitely there. So this is something where it's been not a battle. It's just been a challenge for everybody to try and
Hmm.
find the appropriate way of managing that in terms of total boron, and then you have to do a follow up to look at your inputs to see what sort of boron species are in there. Um, the the binary nature of the flagging system is a frustration for me. And so that we've either got a red flag or no flag. And if you've got something like contamination coming in incoming water, for example, boron, then that may well show up in the it will show up in the wastewater. Now, if you've got incoming boron, you're, as a dyer, you're not a boron removal factory. It will appear in the wastewater, And those sorts of flags, we need either an orange flag or a way to knock those flags off. So when we're thinking forward to the policing, there's a few complexities there. Um, so these are things that have exercised our brains and taken some time in the update process.
Hmm. Tejas, big challenges for you, or do you agree with those main points?
I think yes, cache numbers has been always an point of discussion with Phil and with the Wastewater Council, I would say. So yes, this has been one of the challenge I think which Phil has clearly addressed. I think the second point which I will also agree with Phil is about the boron. So in the earlier versions, if you see, we had a limit value of or a reporting limit of 100 ppb for the five boron based efforts which are there in the guidelines. And then we analyzed that data. We also contacted a few facilities, and we saw the incoming concentration of the water of the boron which is coming through the inlet water, and which was typically in the range of 150 200. And surprisingly, all that detections were in that range. And through the informed decisions, we updated the limits to, so that we do not unnecessarily punish the facilities for the fault for which they have not committed. So these are the kind of challenges what we encounter. And yeah, cache numbers and boron always has been. And I think one of a challenge which I have personally seen is basically for the sludge documentation. That has been recently introduced from the last update, and we see quite a lot of facilities are filling that sludge documentation, and based on that, the labs are also marking the test based as per the disposal pathway. But we do see some areas where there are certain further points of improvement. I think which we
Hmm.
will maybe take into account when we go for the next updates and also. So yeah, these are some of the topics where we fetch challenges or we get encounter challenges.
Yeah.
Well,
And I think one other thing which is a constant challenge is inconsistent global legislation. Now, with wastewater legislation, it's sort of understandable that there are different piece of legislation because there may be a region where there's very little water typically many times of the year, and others where water is plentiful throughout the year. So you get a dilution factor from rivers and from watercourses, etc. But it is difficult when you're trying to work out, because what we want to do is, as we've mentioned, these are becoming the de facto global standards for wastewater. You want people to have clarity, that if they meet them, then they're okay. What we have to say with wastewater guidelines is you have to meet whichever is tougher, the wastewater guideline or your local regulations, because there is some variation. We also try to align with the recommendations that come out from Blue Sign and from Architect Step, so that if somebody has got a certification for one of those, then they're not doing repeat testing. So alignment with things is an ongoing challenge. That's just the nature of the beast.
Yeah, well, we've already mentioned there's going to be, of course, more work for the future. So my next question was, do you now get to rest? But my suspicion is that you do not.
No, first of all, I think at some stage, myself and the council get to rest. Tejas never gets to rest. Um, but there is when the guidelines are first published, there's a period of time where signatories can review the guidelines and give us their feedback. So that is quite a, an active part. So next time you see Tejas, he'll have less hair and it'll be grey, because it's quite a difficult. It's a it's a it's a difficult, challenging period gathering all that feedback. But it's really important that we put it out there for review. So that people can check for errors and give us their words of wisdom, but also so that people, can give us their, if they think we could improve something, or they think we've missed something, or they think something is unworkable, then that's an important part. And it really is important. We really want constructive criticism. We
Mhm.
want that feedback. And I'll give you an example of where we are in a little bit of a, um, using English colloquial terms, we're in a bit of a pickle with the MRSL Council. We've got ADCA on the MRSL. ADCA is a chemical that is used as a blowing agent for foams. We put it on the main list in version 3 because it's an SVHC in the EU. And it went through the review process and went onto the main list. When it was finally published, brands, facilities came out and said, you can't have ADCA on the main list because that's what we use. It's like banning air, or banning water. This is what is used, and there's no alternative. Now, my response to that is, why didn't you tell us during the review process? So I
Mhm.
would say, with the wastewater guidelines too, please, please, please take a look. We're not going to be offended if you come back and say, this is wrong. You can't do it. It's really helpful information for us. So that's an important part of the process. And I say it's more workload for Tejas than it is for me. So we're nearly getting to rest.
Thanks, Phil. Thanks, Phil. I think when we release the guidelines pertaining to the wastewater, that is just the picture what everybody sees. Oh, yeah, this is released. Now the next, but there are many background activities, as I mentioned earlier, which happens in silos in parallel, probably post the wastewater guidelines are released, and those activities starts now till the implementation of the wastewater guidelines actually starts. So there are many activities. So plus there are candidate listed topics which we need to work on. So we need to plan our next meetings accordingly, see the times and see how that has to be completed within the stipulated time frame. So uh, I don't think we ever get time to rest after all these things.
Yeah, and so I don't want to. I know Tejas is going to be doing a separate session on the details and the technical things, but another thing that is coming down the track quite soon are going to be water benchmarks, which are going to be um, released by ZDHC. So in terms of measuring people's water use performance, and they'll be tailored to the type of facility and the products and processes. But it's something that we are looking at with the wastewater guidelines as well, because we know that these are concentration based limit values. So people can dilute to conformance, which is, we're uncomfortable with that. So we've got also work going on looking at water and water consumption, so that we may well be looking at either total effluent loading rather than concentration based, to either replace or work hand in hand with concentration based. Unfortunately, global legislation almost all works on concentration based. Some jurisdictions do have load based, and this is something that we are working on in the background. So in terms of rest, we've got rest. We will have rest coming soon for actual council work for the wastewater guidelines, but there's always things to work on in the background.
Yes, I've got a couple more questions from the chat. Let's just find these. From Savanka de Fonseca. Are there any plans to work with CETs in implementing the ZDHC wastewater guidelines in the future, even though this might be legally and technically challenging, as CETs treat wastewater from different industries at particular industrial zones apart from textile?
In the
I would
previous
I'll copy it into our written chat Slack, sorry.
yeah, in the previous versions, CTPs were considered out of scope. The thought process at the moment is that they will be welcome to to participate and to be checked against the wastewater guidelines. Now, it's not going to be mandatory because it is, as Donka says, it's a legal challenge, and how do you do it? But if there is a CTP that says, I want to have a Clearstream report, I think we'd be delighted about that. And I think it may be that certain facilities and certain brands have got the leverage to do that. So I would welcome it. The thing that we've got to be really careful about, though, is this flagging system, because if they conform, great. If they don't, how are you going to make a CTP responsible for looking at the chemical inputs? And even if you are a facility that feeds into the CTP and you've got a big brand pushing you to get that CTP, to participate. What you don't want is red flags against your name with the current system. So I think we've got to. This is where we need to look at the flagging system as well. But I'd love to get them all doing Clearstream reports, but I think we've got to be really, really careful and pragmatic about how we deal with non-conformance from CTPs.
Because it would only just to so I understand it, so that it's right if they test if they test at the CET, it would basically indicate that there could potentially be a problem, but would not actually provide any clarity because it could be from any of the streams that go there.
Yeah,
Yes?
yeah,
Yeah.
and
We
in
need to understand.
yeah,
We need to understand that in major or the major production countries, CETPs are managed by the local regulations. Okay, and they are
Hmm.
not only pertaining to textiles, leather, apparel, or footwear, wherein our wastewater guidelines are pertaining to these four sectors. So a
Hmm.
CETP may receive effluent from steel, metal, mining, healthcare. I don't know how many industries that are operating in that particular industrial zone or industrial area. So any facilities that discharge to CTP, they are classified as indirect. And our programs are basically on a facility level, not on the
Hmm.
CTP level. So
yeah.
that's how I wanted to share.
Yeah, I mean, one of the council members has got facilities that are indirect discharges, and he likes to get the information from the CTP that they are conforming with, certainly conventional parameters. And yeah, I'm not quite sure what the status is with MRSL, but he does that, slightly offline to the ZDHC program. So I think it's
Hmm.
good practice to know that you're not just sort of saying, well, I've sent it down there and now it's no longer my responsibility. You want he says he wants to know that his effluent is being treated properly. And I think
Hmm.
that's a reasonable approach, but we've got to be really careful how we integrate or semi-integrate it into the official program.
No, that all makes sense.
Yeah.
Last question for you from the chat. Are there any plans to launch a smart testing grid for wastewater, similar to the MRSL with the launch of the Wastewater Guidelines version 3.0?
It's still part of the candidate list and it
Hmm.
is work in process. So it will not be released with the wastewater 3.0, but we will see how to further integrate this once we are ready with the smart testing.
Yeah. Obviously what we need to know is we need that, a full inventory, so check. So we need an in-check report, and we need to know that that is absolutely exhaustive, and we need very good, accurate supplier profiles. Now, at the moment, the supplier profiles will be almost if you were to bump into somebody in the street and say, well, what's your factory? Oh, I'm a cotton dye house. Well, actually, that might be 80% of your business, but you may do some cotton poly blends, or you might do some cotton nylon blends. So if somebody said, well, I'm a cotton dye house, we wouldn't test for certain chemicals and dyes associated with polyester in a smart grid. But actually, that's where we need the supplier profiles to be accurate. So it relies on the in-check being in good shape and exhaustive. It relies on a good supplier profile. And I would guess going forward that if you have got X number of clean Clearstream reports over a period of time and a very high percentage score on your in-check report, then we can start looking at smart testing. The other thing to bear in mind with smart testing is that laboratories tend to test groups and families of chemicals. So even if you said, look, out of these this list of flame retardants, only 20% could be applicable to us. They're going to test them all anyway. So we've got to work out what the actual savings are on a laboratory basis. What is the purpose of the reduced testing? It needs to be to make it quicker, to make it more cost effective, but we don't want too much to slip through the net. So we love the concept of smart testing, but it needs to be properly planned through.
I do have one more question. I know I'd said that was the last one, but and I also posted this into our document in case you need to see it. But given that laboratory capabilities and expertise can vary across regions, how does ZDHC ensure consistency and reliability in wastewater test results globally so that facilities are assessed on a uniform standard?
Very good question. I think this question is for my quality team, but since they are not there, I will try my best to reply on their behalf. See, we have a set process. Once we release the guidelines, then the applications open up for the interested laboratories to apply for that particular version of the guidelines. The laboratories are assessed on a particular quality standard. Whether you have this particular ISO 17025, what are the parameters you test in your laboratory, what is the LOQ, and all those kind of technical details which our quality team verifies. Along with that, we also verify or the samplers who go to the facility to pick up the wastewater and the sludge samples. We do have a accredited or approval process. Until and unless you enroll, you qualify, and you pass that particular test, a laboratory will also be not get approved, as well as the sampler will also be not get approved. And this applies globally to all the laboratories who are enrolling in our program, at least for the wastewater part. And through that, we also conduct the round robin test. Sample is picked up on a particular facility and it is circulated to the laboratories, and we compare the test results. And if we find any results which are not similar, we will definitely check with that particular laboratory, as we have the master master results with us. So through that process, we do check, and we ensure that the laboratories are, following the requirements what are laid down by us.
Yeah.
We have a pretty thorough testing regime for the testers. Yeah.
Yeah, I think one thing that Taylor just touched on there, and I'm not a testing specialist at all. I have a reasonable knowledge of it, but I'm not an expert. But we've got testing specialists on the council, and with wastewater, as important as the testing is the sampling, and we can't stress that enough, because you can have 100 laboratories around the world that are all perfect and identical and always do a great job. But if you deliver junk to them and variable things to them, the results that come out aren't going to be great. So this is one of the things when we're looking at test methods and recommendations that we have to consider when we're doing the guidelines. So there are a couple of things that have changed in the latest guidelines, like foam, because people are saying, well, visible foam. Some facilities have got discharge pipes that are a mile long. How do you get there? Some facilities have got discharge pipes where it's dangerous to get to the outlet on a riverbank. And how do you check temperature differences and things like that? So the sampling is equally important as the labs, and sometimes it's easy to point fingers at a lab and say, well, they've given me a terrible result, but they've just tested what's been presented to them. And one item that is especially important is anything where you're looking at live bugs. So live bugs, that they will multiply exponentially in the right conditions. So you have to be careful there that you've got the right sampling and the right conditions for transportation, because it's a dynamic situation.
I believe that is the last question, actually. So, any final thoughts from either of you before I start telling about the forum calls for next week? Well, for next month.
No, the only thing from me is I hope people can see from this call that we we do our best. We've got a group of people with great knowledge who make these decisions. We've sort of we always say this with the MRSL. We've done the easy work, so we're often working in grey areas. We're often working in difficult areas. We do our best. We're not perfect, but we're transparent, and we welcome feedback. We welcome questions and queries. We're here to help. This is, hopefully we put things out that are in an easy to understand format, but please don't suffer in silence. Just reach out, talk to us, tell us about your concerns, tell us about if you've got anything that you want to add, and it's just an open dialogue.
Great. Then let's take a look at the next slide here. Forum calls for the next three at the end of November will be with Prasad Pant and Francesco Pianca about what is new about Supplier to Zero and what are the benefits. 17th of December will be a look back over the year with Frank Mitchell and Joe Little. And then in January, we'll start the year with chemicals to zero progressive. Sorry, a new new message came in the chat just now. 28th of January with Prasad, Elisa Gavazza, and Vanessa Schultz. If you have not registered yet, please register for the forum calls using the QR code. And also let's see, is this the very last? That's the very last slide. I just want to give one final reminder. Please use the community forum, sign up for it, join it, and ask your questions there, follow the conversation. Thank you all so much. I know this one ran a little bit over time, but normally we're saving time and getting you out of here at 35 minutes or 40. So have a wonderful day, and we'll see you next month. Thank you so much, Phil. Thank you so much, Tejas.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.